Hey everyone, Scott here, and we've got a thrift store Bible. This is a Nelson Reference Bible, model 754, that I picked up at my local MCC thrift store, and it's in the American Standard Version, and that is why I grabbed it. I was very excited to see that. I've been wanting an ASV Bible, now I have one. What is the ASV? Some of you know, some may not. In the 1880s, a group of English scholars released the Revised Version, which was a revision of the King James Version. The American scholars released their own version in its complete form in 1901. It's called the Revised Version Standard American Edition, and then came to be known simply as the American Standard Version. That's what this is. So, it's over 100 years old. A lot of people are not aware of it today, and even in its own time, it never really displaced the King James Version as the primary choice. So why should we care about it now? Well, it is very important for historical reasons in what it did and for being the basis of many of our modern translations. I thought it was notable. Tim Wildsmith wrote this book not too long ago called Bible Translations for Everyone. I just read it recently. It's a great introduction if you want to know a lot more about English Bible translation and just want a quick overview. But it's a short book, but he even had to dedicate a chapter to the Revised Version and ASV because they are important. And I thought he put it well here. They set a precedent for scholarly revisions and translation updates, particularly when accounting for new textual discoveries and changes in the English language. That's something we take for granted today. They did not when these translations came out. So, that is the significance. And he goes on to mention, some of the translations that relate back to this one. This was the basis for the Amplified Bible and the NASB from Lockman Foundation. It was the basis for the RSV, which in turn has led to the NRSV and ESV, which are still published and updated today. It's also been reported that Kenneth Taylor's Living Bible Paraphrase, this is was his basis. I don't know how significant that is. His paraphrase was so different, but another one I don't see people mention is this is also the base translation for the World English Bible, which is freely available online in the public domain. But let's go ahead and have a look at it, and we'll talk more about the translation a little bit later. So this particular copy is very similar to one that R. Grant Jones reviewed on his channel, and I will have a link to that. He had the model 756, which has a leather cover, stitching, and more notes pages. This one is a bonded leather cover. It is just a glued binding, and it only has one note page. Although I think the paper might be the same. It seems very similar. Genuine bonded leather. Of course, bonded leather just means it's really not leather, so adding the word genuine is just saying, yep, it's really not leather. Marketing. I don't know how old this is for sure. Jones thought that these were printed in the 70s, maybe into the mid-80s. But I'm skipping the dedication page because there's some information on there I don't want to show. But this was given as a gift in 1989. It's possible that it had been sitting on the shelf of a Bible store somewhere before it was purchased to give away. It's interesting to me it was gifted in 1989. I'm just curious who would be gifting an ASV Bible in 1989. You had the RSV, NASB, you had the NIV, had been out for 5 years, was super popular, as well as some other translations, but yeah, that's interesting. So there's copyright information, 1901 by Thomas Nelson, then that copyright was renewed in 1929 by another group to protect the text, and it is now in public domain. The copyright has expired in the United States. So there's some prefaces. I won't go into too many details because Jones goes into it with his, and it's really the same Bible. And some of the same issues that he saw, primary thing I noticed is when it's printed well, it's printed well. When it's not, it's not. It is not consistent, just like his copy. There are some places where it's quite faint. These pages look pretty good, but I do like the layout. It has a very old feel to it. It feels like an older Bible than it is. I think the layout's probably older. This, as I understand, this was kind of typical with the ASV. There are no section headers in the text, but there are some at the top. And this is the Nelson Reference Edition. There are a lot of references. If we go into some places in the New Testament, I know that there are a lot. I know in Romans, it seemed like I went too far. Here we go. Yeah, so here's in Romans, you see references coming all the way down that center column and then spilling into the second column here at the bottom of the page. So people who are really into reference Bibles, there's a lot here. The cover itself, I mentioned it's a bonded leather. It's not great. I already found when I was opening it one time, I started noticing it was trying to crease back here. And so I'm going to have to be, right there in the middle, it's trying to crease. I'm going to have to be really gentle with it. Here's the one note page. If you see the video from Jones, his has like, I think, at least 3 of those. It's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the ASV. So it is more or less, it's a revision of the King James Version. It's a revision of the Revised Version, which is a revision of the KJV. It is using a critical text in the New Testament, so that was a big difference from the King James Version. It is a very literal translation. Every source I've seen puts it as being more literal than the King James, which is a very literal translation. I know Jones, his chart, he shows the ASV being very literal. That came at a cost. It doesn't have some of the beautiful poetry and of the King James Version, so there is some loss there, but it's still, it reads very much like King James, Elizabethan English. What else do we want to say? So yeah, it's kind of, very wooden. It has that reputation. You've probably, if you're into like the New American Standard Bible, NASB, at least the version in the 70s had that reputation as well. Well, it was a revision of this, so there you go. I want to discuss some of the issues that are brought up almost every time the ASV gets discussed or reviewed online. And Jones covered these in his videos, which I'm going to link to several of his videos where he gets into more details on the translation, but I wanted to give my own take on some things. Now, this first one, I don't really have much more to say than anyone else, but this is an important thing. In John chapter 9, verse 38, the blind man, he's been given his sight by Jesus, and he says, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. And there's a note here, the Greek word denotes an act of reverence, whether paid to a creature as here or to the Creator. So the note there is calling Jesus a creature, which would seem to deny his deity. I mean, that's just a terrible note. So obviously, if you are a lowercase o Orthodox Christian, you affirm the Nicene Creed. That's not an acceptable note. So I completely get people's concern about that. And but it is there. It is a note that comes with the translation. The other issue I see brought up comes to us in a few places. We're looking at the second epistle of Peter, chapter 1, verse 1. And you see something very similar in Titus chapter 2, verse 13. And it's reading here, the righteousness of our God and the Savior, Jesus Christ. And the issue that comes up here is that it could be ambiguous. is this saying God and the Savior Jesus Christ as the same person, or as two separate people? Is it saying that Jesus is God and Savior, or is it referring to God and Jesus who is Savior? And, the issue that gets brought up is that inclusion of the word the. That is not in the Revised Version. It's not in the King James Version. And again, something very similar found in Titus. Now, this gets into things that are way above the pay grade of this channel. You can look into the Granville-Sharp rule. That seems to be, what kind of leads to how this gets translated now. But even the King James Version is not as clear as modern translations are. So you see, and I'm going to put these up on the screen. You see in the King James Version, the righteousness of God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. So there's still, is that the same person or not? And then, of course, with the ASV we just looked at, you get the righteousness of our God and the Savior, Jesus Christ. And then it's with the RSV that you see this, where the Granville-Sharp rule is put into place. And it reads, the righteousness of our God and Savior, Jesus Christ. So there it's very clear. It's the same person. And I've seen some people really, present this as a pretty big deal with the ASV. But, I've also seen articles pointing out that even in the King James Version, it is a bit ambiguous, potentially. I don't see people attacking the King James Version or saying, hey, you shouldn't use the King James Version because it doesn't make it clear that Jesus is God in this verse. But I see the ASV get attacked a lot too. Now, is the way the ASV handles it potentially furthering the problem? Maybe. I'm not a Greek scholar or translator or even an expert in English, but it seems to me that, where we really see this to where we can go, yes, that's how it should be, is in the RSV. I see more people attack the RSV than the King James Version, so, and that's for other reasons, but I think that's the thing. When you vilify a translation based on just a part of it, that's what happens, and that's why I try not to vilify a translation unless I think it's really just overall very poor. I haven't found a translation yet that I don't find some issue with, and I use various translations both from evangelical perspectives, mainline, and a few others from other perspectives. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Now I will say there is, I think part of the concern is there were some prominent Unitarians who were involved in creating the ASV. I've seen that mentioned a few places. I know M.A. Marino's mentioned that in some comments on YouTube. I always appreciate his feedback on any video he comments on. So, these are things to be cautious with. As with any translation, there's going to be some things that we may think could have been done better, or the translators got it wrong. God bless us. We have lots and lots and lots of English translations. We are very blessed there. So compare them and understand the issues. The last thing I want to discuss concerning the ASV is how it handles the personal name of God. And here is a blessing in Numbers chapter 6 that is probably quite familiar to many of you. And you see, though, it says Jehovah bless thee instead of the Lord bless thee. And that is what you find throughout the translation in the ASV. So as you may know, and some of you may not, and that's okay, in the original Hebrew it does not say the Lord. What it has is the name of God. And the issue we have is we don't know how God's name is pronounced. We don't have the original vowels, just the consonants. We can go on a whole tangent about that. I'm not going to. You can look into that yourself. But we have the four letters YHWH, which is referred to as the Tetragrammaton. And how you represent that in English generally has been the Lord, which goes back to ancient Jewish practice. but there have been attempts to present it other ways. Jehovah was a way that it was believed to be pronounced in, I don't know, 19th century, that now scholars say, no, that's not it, that's wrong. So it's fallen out of favor. You may be familiar with Yahweh. That has become the 20th century and so far 21st century accepted scholarly opinion on how the name of God would have been said. The fact is we just don't know. But the ASV chose to use Jehovah, and it's unfortunate because it is accepted in general as wrong now. It sounds quite dated. It's because it's no longer used. Some people associate it with Jehovah's Witnesses, so and you may be thinking that yourself because we don't hear it used anymore except in the Jehovah's Witness faith. The other issue with it is, there are still those who will not say it, don't want to read it or write it, or, that is a practice that is still in use, going back to ancient Judaism. So, it makes the translation unusable for them. That is, I think, an unfortunate thing about the ASV. It doesn't bother me that much. It's not my preference, but I don't find it objectionable. I probably would prefer, generally for me in the English translations, to just have the Lord. I do have like the Jerusalem Bible of 1966. I have a copy of that. That uses Yahweh. The Legacy Standard Bible is the most recent one I know of that practices that. And yeah, the issue with that is scholarly opinion may change eventually and say, no, you know what, we've decided that's wrong. One very interesting alternative is to just include the Tetragrammaton as is in the text. I only know of one translator who's done that, and that is Everett Fox. So here is the 5 books of Moses, a translation by him, and we'll go ahead and open to number 6. And here's the blessing from number 6, and you see that is exactly what he's done here. He has the letters there, and he leaves it to the reader to determine how they will pronounce it. His recommendation is the Lord, but he leaves it for the reader to determine that for themselves and says, this is a good approximation of the situation we have in Hebrew, and he thinks it's worth showing that to the readers in English as well. So that's an interesting way to handle it. I like it actually a lot, but I also understand that you're not going to see that happen in mainstream Bible translations. It's not pronounceable, it's confusing, and it would turn a lot of people off. But yeah, I will have to do a video on this translation sometime. It's a very fascinating one. People who like Robert Alter's translation would be interested in that. But anyways, that's it. This is long enough, and I'm talking about a lot of things that I think have been pretty well covered by others. If you want to know more about the ASV or about the Thomas Nelson Reference Edition of the ASV, I highly recommend watching our Grant Jones videos. He has several. I will link to all of them. He has a video where he reviews the leather-bound version of this, another video where he reviews the ASV from Prolific Industries, and he gets into some of the translation distinctives and concerns. He also has a 2-part video series on comparing the ASV to the ESV, which is a descendant of it, and that is a really interesting way to see how Bible translation has changed in that tradition going from 1901 to today. So highly recommend all those videos. If you have anything you'd like to share, any thoughts or comments, that's why I do these videos. I enjoy hearing from people, so please leave a comment below, give the video a like, and if you're not already subscribed, I invite you to do so. As always, thank you for watching, God bless, and we'll see you for the next one. So immediately after recording that, I realized I completely forgot to talk about the condition of this and the price I paid. And I try to always do that, because this is thrift store Bibles. Well, It was like new. The ribbon was still tucked in. You saw it was in the box. Somebody gifted this, and then whoever received it just never really used it. So uh, other than the inscription, like new, like I just bought it myself from a Bible store in the 1980s. So that was really cool. And the price I paid was $10.99. That is an excellent price for this in such beautiful condition. And I'm always happy to support the Mennonite Central Committee, who runs or is involved in many of the thrift stores that I frequent here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So there's that. Again, thank you for watching.